Okay, we still have some folks joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got some great content today. Want to be sensitive to everybody's time, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. Our agenda today will run through introductions, both of EnablePath and of myself and our presenter, Ernest Lessinger. We're going to take a quick minute just to overview the EnablePath webinar series, kind of why we do them, what we hope everybody gets out of them. We'll talk specifically about today's webinar goals. We're going to talk about the overall Lightning element review. One of the things that we've found out is that there's still a lot of discussion, and I don't want to say confusion, but there's a lot to Lightning and the many different pieces that came out. So we're going to speak to all of them, at least at the high level. We're going to talk about enabling Lightning, both how to and when to. We'll talk about some of the core features and service functionality, and then we'll take questions and answers. We're going to drill in mostly on the what we think are the kind of the interesting points of Lightning. Interesting is always subjective, but since the webinar release, or I'm sorry, since the winter release about 60 days ago, we've interacted with quite a few clients, prospects, partners. So we're going to kind of focus our points on those items as we run through. Just a little bit about who's on the call today. Obviously, we're EnablePath. We're a Salesforce Platinum partner. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of our parent company, Burlesoft. This combined strength gives us hundreds of certified architects and consultants. It really allows us to function in a manner that makes us big enough to take on most projects, but small enough to be reactive and care. And this approach is proved out by a long list of successful projects and happy customers. Invite everybody to look us up on the App Exchange and take a look at what people are saying about us. We do an excellent job. In addition to our general business teams, we also have specific vertical practices in health and life sciences, as well as manufacturing. And we've got a real full life cycle of services, beginning with planning and advisory services through to design, implementation, optimization, and then services to drive adoption, and of course, ongoing support. We've got some really strong support offerings. We're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work out of our Western office here in Golden, Colorado. I'll be hosting today. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Sales Engineering. And with me in presenting the majority of our webinar today is Ernest Lessinger. Ernest is our CTO and a certified Salesforce technical architect. So the webinar series overall, basically it's an interpretive, use case focused review of releases, primarily releases by Salesforce, but all advances really in Salesforce functionality, and sometimes we do them on ancillary application functionality as well. You're always going to have certified developers, consultants, or technical architects that will present these webinars and do the interpretations for us. We typically do them after the Salesforce releases, and then plus follow on as appropriate. You know, Salesforce does a great job with releases and with their accompanying release notes. The speed of advancement in technology and functionality that Salesforce drives is really awesome. You know, they're Forbes' most innovative company year after year for good reason. But these changes come kind of fast and furious, and sometimes they're kind of hard to stay on top of as we perform our day jobs. So in recognition of this, we established this webinar series just to make our interpretations and our opinions as to where the advances fit kind of in an ongoing org and in a new deployment and in different use cases. We want to make those opinions available to the ecosystem. The series has become very popular with you know, registration and enrollment and participation continue to grow. We have a great cross section of attendees even today as I look at the list. You know, we've got users, admins, App Exchange partners, developers, EnablePath employees, Salesforce employees, you know, even competitors, which is fine with us. You know, our goal here is really to drive added value in the ecosystem and ultimately, you know, prove ourselves worthy to be kind of your first call partner when somebody does need something. We want to be who you reach out to. So today's goal specifically, as we said, we're going to overview the Lightning elements at the high level. We hope to provide just a foundation of knowledge around the new features, what they are, how you can use them, when you should be thinking about them. We're going to explain and demonstrate how to enable that Lightning experience if you choose to, and Ernest is going to talk through quite a bit of that. We'll talk through specifically some of the benefits that we see in Service Cloud, and while some of the UI, the Lightning experience benefits may come into play, there's also a lot of the Lightning component elements that we feel play well in Service Cloud, and Ernest has a great demonstration on that coming up shortly. We'll provide answers to your questions where we can. You'll see in the GoToWebinar control panel the questions box. Feel free to submit them. We'll handle them in real time as we can, and if not, we will have time at the end for Q&A, and we'll take care of them there. We're hopeful to provide those answers. Where we can't, we're hopeful to be able to direct you to the appropriate resource, and we are going to share some of that here in just a minute. And then again, our non-altruistic goal is to establish EnablePath as your first call Salesforce partner. We want to establish that credibility so that you can come to us almost regardless of the need in the Salesforce ecosystem. So the Lightning experience, a lot of people look at it just as the UI piece, and there certainly is. When we talk Lightning experience, we are speaking mostly of changes in UI and UX. Some examples of that we have here. There's a big improvement in the sales process. I know we're kind of Service Cloud focused here today. They launched a lot of the elements first in that sales process and primarily there, but there is some great stuff available for Service Cloud as well. There's some implications there for development that we'll touch on. And right now, not all objects are supported, and we've got a good sheet on that. And this webinar will be available to you after the fact also, so you can go back and reference it. And you can also reference the release notes for what objects are covered. The activity feed's been enhanced. Users usually want to know a couple things. What just happened on my object, be it account, opportunity, or case in this case, and what we need to do next. Contextual hovers came out that help us. It made the UX a little easier. You're not going to different pages. You can hover and see a lot more. You can see a lot more right there on the spot. The opportunity board that we covered on the last webinar was a big push and really a good enhancement on the Sales Cloud side. The customizable dashboards, this is one that was asked for heavily. It was one of the most requested features on the Idea Exchange, and it's a great example of Salesforce reacting to those and doing a good job reacting to those. And then some other enhancements that we'll touch on that you can read in the release notes. As, if not more important, however, is what Lightning is the way Lightning's impacting how Salesforce can be customized and what really can speed deployment and development. And this slide that Ernest likes to call the soapbox slide is really telling. And we're going to spend a quick minute here, and then Ernest is going to take a look at it at the end, and after a demonstration kind of jump back to this slide to really drive home the point of what we need, of what we're saying here. A lot of the components that have come out have made what used to be custom code and what used to require custom code and Visualforce and triggers and classes. A lot of things can now be done in a more declarative manner with clicks, not code. And it's really empowering admins to do what used to be considered development work. And it's very powerful. And a couple of things that we see it doing is it allows who used to be we consider a solution architect handling clicks to do more and kind of move up the scale of use case complexity in what they can do. And it's freeing up our technical architects to do more advanced development. So a lot of what used to be done by the admin and then handed off, maybe designed and defined by the admin, but handed off to the architect, now can be completed by that admin. And it really expands the use cases for both clicks and code. It gives more complex commercial use cases. It makes more complex commercial use cases available almost at the same budget. And really, the tools in and around Visualforce and Apex are being enhanced to allow more real enterprise-level development to take place by the architects. It really is a material change, and again, Ernest is going to touch on it here again in a minute. It's a powerful change, and it merits caution. As we enable more people to make true functional changes in the orgs, we've got to do it with a bit of caution, and we encourage everybody to take advantage of another of the releases that came out in Winter 16 and dive into the Trailheads. The new training approach from Salesforce is really outstanding. I mean, we've all wished for an easier way to learn about Salesforce, And I encourage you to take a look at the Trailheads. They provide developers and administrators a guided learning path. They take you through the key features of Salesforce. They use a good interactive online tutorials, really beefed up, I think, from where they were before. Hopefully you guys have all taken some. There's a plethora. This is one of the things they did a really good job with this release, is having a lot of these pre-built. You know, they're not doling them out one at a time. While they still are augmenting the library, there really is a substantial amount of material already available. So we encourage you guys to get in there and take some of these self-paced online learnings and follow the learning path that meets your needs. You know, the module nature and the engaging content, usually like 10 to 15 minutes each. I find them highly valuable to me. Try to get into at least a couple a week and drive through there. So as we make these large changes, we really encourage you to take advantage of Trailhead. So that's kind of at the real high level what we're hoping to accomplish today. With that, Ernest Lessinger is going to take us through some demos and share his expertise on Lightning and how it impacts Salesforce at this time.
Excellent, thank you, Kevin. I see that some people are asking questions already, so I may or may not answer those questions in real time as you ask them, but please continue to ask the questions, and we'll answer them at the end if I don't get to them now. Just a quick reminder, EnablePath is not Salesforce. And that means that although we are using some screenshots and some images from the Salesforce release notes and from some of their websites, we're using those for demonstration purposes and to demonstrate the Salesforce technology, not because we made it. And as a consequence of that, any comments or suggestions or statements I make about what I hope will happen or what I wish will happen or what I expect will happen in the future are exactly that. They're just comments or wishes, and obviously we don't have control over what Salesforce does, and therefore you should make your purchase decisions and make your design and architecture decisions based on the technology that exists today. Now that said, we do expect that and strongly anticipate that Salesforce will continue to improve the Lightning experience, that they'll continue to improve and really make this the future of Salesforce, which is why we're spending the time to show you these webinars. So the first thing I want to do is I'm logged into my EP Lightning 1 Salesforce instance. This is a free developer instance that I created. I happen to create this through the Environment Hub, which is a tool that's available to partners and to both consulting partners and ISV partners. But for those of you who are customers, you can always create a sandbox and test Lightning in your sandbox. In fact, I strongly recommend that because it will allow you to see how Lightning works and behaves in a realistic environment. Or you can always go to developer.force.com and create a free developer sandbox from there. So the first thing I want to do is show you how to set up Lightning Experience. Now you can see I already have switched to Lightning Experience, but I'm going to pass over that for momentarily and show you, if you click on your name, click on Setup, click on Lightning Experience in the upper left-hand corner with the red New label there. Scroll past the marketing there, and you'll see that I've already enabled these three buttons. If you are not a system administrator will have to go in and grant you access to Lightning Experience. But when you're ready, just go in to the setup screen as I showed you, enable, 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 and you'll be able to activate Lightning Experience. You do that by, from your home page, or really any page in Salesforce, click on your name and click on Switch to Lightning Experience. The first few times it will say you're about to switch to your default Salesforce experience. Just check this box that says I don't need to see this message again, because you don't need to see this message again. And we'll wait for the Lightning Experience to load. Now you see this loading window. What this is telling you, if you know how modern web applications work, is that Salesforce is loading a single page app. And basically, in the new Lightning Experience, all pages in Salesforce and all operations in Salesforce are going to take place within what I was always taught to call Chrome. It has nothing to do with the web browser. And that's this concept where you have the taskbar on the left, you have these little widgets up across the top, including the app selector, and then the actual content will show in this page. And that has some implications for Visualforce development and how URLs work and how links work in Salesforce. I'll talk about those a little bit later. But the first thing I wanted to do was demonstrate some new capability of Lightning Experience. It's not technically part of the Service Cloud, but that is related to how you might work with a customer and how you might support a customer. So what I did was I went over to the left sidebar, clicked on Contacts, and then I chose a contact from my recently viewed list. Now, I'm actually going to take a moment and go back and look, and you might recall that we do have the ability now to view charts on this list view. We also have an easier ability to change how this list view is filtered. We demonstrated that in the last webinar, and I believe the recording and the web presentation deck are available for you. So you can go back and look at those a bit later if you would like. But what I'm going to do is go into the contact. Now you can see we already have a case created. I'm going to ignore that for a moment. But you can also see that we now have this, this header bar, header information available on every record. We have a related list visible immediately, and we have some details. The intent is that whatever is really most critical about this content, or this contact rather, should be visible up here, and you have room for 8 different fields. And then you can always click in and look at your details as well. Now, right now, these pages are not terribly configurable with Lightning components, partly because Salesforce is still working on the ability to configure with Lightning components, and because AppExchange vendors and ISV vendors are still in the process of creating a lot of really cool Lightning components. As this grows, or as that base of technology grows, I'm sure Salesforce will be expanding your ability to customize this page. But for now, you have your related list and your details. You also have your activity stream, and you have your collaboration stream, which is essentially chatter. What I'm going to do is go over to activity. I'm going to click in here and get ready to send an email. I'm going to say, welcome to the Lightning Experience. And I'm going to write my email here. So I'm going to say, Carol, welcome to the Lightning Experience. Put my name and my title. Okay, now what I could do is I could just click preview if I wanted to see how it looks. It looks pretty much like I intended. I could also click send at this point. But I'm not going to. What I'd like to do is, because this is an email that I expect to send very often, I'm just going to go ahead and replace some of these fields with mail merge fields off of the contact. So I'm going to take the contact first name. Whoop. Oh, not sure what's going on there. That's a Lightning error happening there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and insert a template that I've already saved. Okay, it's going to overwrite the current email text. And now I'm using a template that will let me preview. And you can see that I've pre-filled that text. Now, this is important for those of you who are administrators to note that you now save templates from this composer screen. You don't necessarily have to go into the setup and save a template. And it's also important to note that templates that were created in the Salesforce Classic admin screens are not available in Lightning Experience, and vice versa. So once you've created a template in Lightning Experience, it is not available in Salesforce Classic. Now, this happens to be a very simple template because I didn't have time earlier to build a letterhead. But if I'd wanted to, I could have gone in and defined a letterhead with a header and a footer, where I would have a company logo and brand at the top. I might have some support contact information and possibly a legal disclaimer or something at the bottom. And that would be very possible with these Salesforce templates. But what I'm going to go do now is I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. I'm also going to go in, and because I had that error message, I'm just going to refresh the Salesforce Lightning Experience. Now, you won't do this under normal circumstances, but again, because Salesforce is a single-page app, I find that refreshing the page occasionally helps, and I'm sure Salesforce is working on that technology. Now, you can see that it did save my URL, so I'm already on the contact. I'm just going to carry on working on this contact. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, you know what, there's this case here. It's probably still one, I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new case. I'm going to leave it as a new case. I'm going to give it a subject. This is the Lightning Experience Demo. I'll go ahead and save. And what you see is that you have your usual Salesforce field validation and required fields. So I'm going to call this a web case. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and select an account. Now, I have a demo account 1 that I created earlier that's recently viewed. But instead of doing that, I'm going to take advantage of a feature that people have been asking Salesforce for 15 years, as far as I know. I'm going to create a new account directly from a lookup. And you can see it popped up a new screen. I'm going to we'll go ahead and create EnablePath, LLC. Okay, I can go in, I can select a parent account. I'm not going to bother doing that. And all of the other fields that are available on this Salesforce, on this account page layout are available to me. I'll click Save. That account has been added. You can see that the screen updated in the background. And now I can go ahead and save this case. Okay, so that case was created. I have my subject, Lightning Experience Demo. I'm going to go ahead and look at that case now. And you can see what we get is the default case feed. Scroll up a little bit to see it. These are actions in Salesforce. I don't really have time on today's demo to talk about how actions work, but in the future, actions and Lightning components are really going to be the 2 ways that I expect you'll be customizing and optimizing your Salesforce experience. In the past, pretty much the only way to really change how a standard page layout looks, like the case feed or the standard contact page layout, was to build a Visualforce page. You could either embed that Visualforce page within Salesforce, the standard Salesforce UI, or you could just override the entire page layout with a Visualforce page. A year or 2 ago, Salesforce added these quick actions. And in the first release, they were kind of cool. You could add tasks, you could add emails, things like that. Not too exciting. But recently, you've been able to create quick actions, and I might do that if we have time. But you're now able to create quick actions that default certain fields depending on which quick action you're using. And you can create quick actions that appear in this feed area of a standard page layout, and that default things like the parent record. They can default other fields like the type of task or the type of activity, and they work on custom objects, not just standard objects. So they're a way to create a little mini page layout so that you can very quickly do something like create a support case or add an asset. Or if you're doing back office, potentially for a telco company, I want to very quickly and easily add a circuit with just the 3 or 4 fields that are required for a circuit. Or create the relationship to a new customer, pre-filling the role that that customer fills. So very workflow-driven user interface there. But for now, I'm just going to create a case. So we'll create a case. I'm going to call this case, or a new task rather. I'm going to call this task number 1, important. I'm not going to bother with anything else here. I'm not going to assign it to a contact or anything, but I'm going to leave it not started. Okay, so there's my task. I'm going to create one more task here. Call it task number 2, not important. Okay, I'm going to also leave that not started. Okay, but I am going to go in, and you recall I call this task number 1 important. I'm going to edit this task. And I'm going to change this from in progress. I'm going to say waiting on someone else. I'll leave the priority as normal for now. Okay, so this status is now waiting on somebody else because I've said, you know what, this was so important, I've already delegated it. So now I can go back up to the case. And what I'd like to demonstrate now for you is how you can save thousands of dollars on an EnablePath engagement without even having to call the home shopping network. Okay, and that's by taking some of that work that a year or two ago, and certainly 5 years ago back when I was starting, in the consulting world at least, would have required 2 or 3 days of a developer's time to write a trigger. I'm going to write a trigger that will, when a case is closed, it's automatically going to close all tasks associated to that case that are not currently being worked. Okay? A little bit complicated, not too bad, but it would have required a trigger. So let's go ahead and build a flow. Okay, now I've already created one called close tasks. I did that so that later when I activate this using the process builder, I can use that one and I won't have to worry about whether I accidentally made a typo in this particular flow. So what I did was I clicked on No to create a new flow in the flow builder. And now this is a 4-step task. The first thing I'm going to do is a fast lookup. Okay, I'm going to drag that fast lookup component on. I'm going to call this get task, or get case rather. No, actually, I'm going to call it get tasks. Okay, I'm going to look up the task. I'm going to look it up based on the what ID is equal to, and I'm going to create a new S-object variable, call it the case. This is an input of type case. So what I've done is I've created a new variable that's going to be input into this, and we're going to use the ID, that's going to be input into this flow by the process builder when it's triggered. Okay, I'm also going to add a row here. I'm going to say where the status equals, I'm going to choose from the pick list value. Let's see. I am looking up tasks. Look at new tasks. List of tasks into the tasks. It's a private variable of type task. And okay, this is an issue I run into in my browser, so I'm just going to say okay there. Open it back up. Look at my status pick list values, and you can see I actually have some better values now, so I'm going to use not started. And I'm going to choose the fields I need. The fields I need are ID, and status. Okay, so now I've looked up my list of tasks. The next thing I'm going to do is loop over this list of tasks. I'm going to look through the existing collection variable called the tasks. I'm going to do it in ascending order. There's no reason not to. And I have to create a new variable, new S-object variable called the task. And it's of type task. Okay. The output from that fast lookup is going to be the loop. And now I'm going to do a quick assignment. I'm going to say set status. And I'm going to set the task dot status equal to the pick list value completed. Okay, now I could choose any pick list value here, and in the future, I might want to go in there and change that to be something like deferred or canceled or something like that. But I'm just going to say completed for now. Okay, I'm going to make a link from loop to assignment, and I'm going to do this for each value in the collection. Then I'm going to use a fast update. I'm going to say update task. I'm going to find the task, and I'm going to update it. I'm going to set that as the start, and I'm going to save. And I'm going to call this update tasks on case. Now, a few quick developer notes here. As Kevin said, there's some responsibility that comes with this new ability in Visual Flow. The first is, this is not necessarily best practice. I'm going to look up a list of tasks. I'm going to iterate over those tasks. I'm going to set a value, and then I'm going to update each task independently. It might be better for me to loop over those tasks, set the status, and then upload them as a set of tasks. The reason I'm not doing that is I tried it earlier, and I had some trouble getting that particular script to work. So instead, I'm going to update this independently. Now, you might have some trouble doing this in the event that you are using an API integration, or you're using a list view to edit multiple cases at once, where you might have a lot of classes that need to be updated, or a lot of tasks that need to be updated, or potentially a lot of cases that need to be updated. So that would be one query to get a list of tasks plus one write for each task. Okay, there are Lightning trailheads that are available for how to bulkify flows. There's help available on how to bulkify flows. I definitely recommend you look that up. And while I hate to teach best practice, I'm not going to show you how to do that now, but I will say that if you do not learn how to bulkify flows, you are setting yourself up for pain in the future. Now, the other thing I could have done is, instead of using this fast update and assignment, I could have used a quick action. All of your quick actions are automatically available in your flows, and I can use task.update status, which would allow me to simply specify the record ID and then also specify the status, and that would have the same effect of updating that task. I'm not going to do that, though. I'm going to go with the process that I created earlier. So I've already saved this. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to activate it. If you don't activate it, you can't use it. So both flows and processes do need to be activated before you can use them. So now I'm going to go over to the process builder, and I'll create a process that will fire this. Processes, you can kind of think of them as the new workflow. So I'm going to call this update case. Okay. Again, best practice, so that you don't set yourself up for a world of pain in the future, always add a description. I'm not going to do it now because I don't want to. But we're going to say, let's create this workflow on the case. Anytime the record is created or edited, I'm not going to allow recursion. I'm going to add a criteria. I'm going to call it closed. When these conditions are met, specifically, when the case status equals closed. And I'm going to do this only when a change has occurred. So I'm not going to do this if you edit a closed case. This is only if it was not closed before, but it is closed now. I'm going to add an action. I'm going to trigger a flow. I'm going to say close tasks as the action name. And I'm going to use my close tasks name. Okay, that's not the flow that I created earlier. That's because I just want to make sure that I don't have any problems if I made a typo. Then I have to set my flow variables. I'm going to say the case is equal to the case record that started your process. And I'll save that. Okay, now I'm going to do another thing real quick. I'm going to post to Chatter. I'm going to post to this record. I'm going to mention we'll do it this way. I'm going to say all your, when this case was closed, all open tasks were also closed. Okay. And this is where I could look at the owner ID, for example. I could also mention myself. I can add a topic. Oh, it's not going to do that. It wants me to use add an existing topic, and I don't have one. So we'll just go ahead and save that. And I'll activate it. Okay. Now let's go over to our list of cases. Let's go into our Lightning Experience demo case. Look at our list of related items. You see task 1 important, task 2 not important, where task 2 has not been started. And let's change the status from new to closed. Let's go over to our feed. There's my chatter post. When this case was closed, all unstarted tasks were also closed. Go to our related items, and you can see that my unimportant task has been closed. My important task has been opened. Now, I encourage you to look at the Lightning Trailheads. I encourage you to use Google and search. There is also a cookbook recipe out there for doing a roll-up. So you could, for example, use a visual flow and a process and a validation rule to prevent a case from being closed if there are any escalated tasks. You could potentially close only certain types of tasks, and you could potentially only post this chatter feed message if there are open tasks, or you could post a chatter message from the visual flow that actually mentions only those people who have open tasks. So there's a lot of places that you could definitely take this. So that ends my demo. I'll go ahead and switch over to my PowerPoint presentation. I see that there are some questions. Kevin, go ahead. Let me just see if I can look at them now. Okay, I got some feedback. You should see my screen now. So hopefully what's happening now is those of you who are developers who have watched this demo are saying, oh no, there goes about a quarter of my annual revenue because I can no longer write these simple little triggers for people that I was able to charge them a lot of money for. Well, the good news, first of all, is using visual flows, especially using a lot of visual flows, is not, in my opinion, as simple as Salesforce would like us to think. When you are writing complex logic, you have to have training, you have to have the experience, you have to know how to write complex logic. I do not recommend that admins go out into their production org and immediately start writing visual flows that do very complex things with cases and tasks and things like that. Take some time, learn how to do it, take the training on Trailhead, possibly even go to a course, maybe even call EnablePath for some assistance, and learn how to write this complex logic in scalable and maintainable ways. That said, admins can definitely do it with a little bit of work. So what happens to the developers? Developers have access to Lightning components. Developers have access to Aura. Developers have access to all the backend APIs as well as to Heroku. So again, I expect that admins will be able to do more with Salesforce, and developers will be able to do even more. So raising the bar for both developers and admins. One thing that I didn't show you today is the console case layout. For those of you who are not familiar with console, I definitely recommend that you use the console, or at least look at and consider using the console. I believe some customers might have to pay for it, other customers have it included. Console is definitely the most scalable and configurable way to do service and support in Salesforce. And as you can see here, there's a lot of configurability, right? So there's a pop-up way to see your case history. There's a pop-up for knowledge. You can add pop-ups for phones. You can add pop-ups for live agent that kind of live down there and only notify you if there's something interesting happening. You can have a sidebar with a list of cases. You can have sidebars and bottom bars with Lightning components that show you additional information or allow you to do quick actions on cases. You have first level and second level tabs up across the top, so you can have multiple cases open in the Salesforce UI along with supporting information about accounts and contacts. Again, not strictly speaking part of Lightning, but a lot of the Lightning technologies were part of Console before Salesforce released Lightning. So it's very rich and capability-full feature of Salesforce. And I'll skip through those and you can look at those later. So what's changing in Lightning? And Kevin, warn me if I'm starting to hit our 45-minute time. First of all, Salesforce has committed to support Visualforce indefinitely. But then how many of you remember S-controls? S-controls were essentially the earliest iteration of the concept that eventually became Visualforce. They still exist. They are still supported. Many larger customers and many older customers still use S-controls, but you can't make them anymore. So you definitely want to learn how to generate and how to create Lightning components, and you want to make sure that the ISV partners that you work with use Lightning components or at least support Lightning experience and Lightning components so that you can get that better experience with better mobile support, better experience on your desktop, and then just a better overall user experience flow. What's going to be changing? Visualforce still looks and operates mostly like Visualforce. But it now operates within an iframe inside of that Lightning Experience Chrome, which means it can no longer access the DOM, which is the browser document object model. And it means that JavaScript no longer has access to the window global object. So if you are using JavaScript within your Visualforce pages, either to render a complete user interface or just to do things like page redirects or button styling, things like that, you might have to make a few changes. The other note here is if you remember the old URLs in Salesforce where you could always just type slash and then a record ID, you can still do that, but it causes the entire Salesforce user interface to re-render. Now this is always what happens, but that's so 2014. Lightning Experience is now a single page app, which means it can now re-render only the detail components of the page without re-rendering the whole thing. So it's better to use JavaScript methods that Salesforce has provided for you. You include them in the Visualforce page and you call that JavaScript method instead of using a redirect. There's also a URL that trick that many of you have used, which is you do a slash and then the object prefix /e ? And then you can hard code some values so that you can pre-fill fields. That was never supported by Salesforce. In fact, it was pretty vigorously not supported by Salesforce, but it worked and it still works, but you leave the Lightning experience. You end up back in Salesforce Classic. So that's just a note on how that works. How you fix it, I've provided a link in the presentation that you can look at, and you basically have to add a little bit of code there. Talking about Lightning Experience, just some quick notes. Aura, if you've heard me mention that, is the framework, not the language, in which Lightning components are written. Lightning components are written with JavaScript, HTML5, and XML using Aura components, which are very similar to Visualforce components. The simplest Visualforce pages will probably take 10 or 15 minutes to half an hour to migrate over to Aura and therefore to make them into Lightning components. The most complex Visualforce pages could require a complete rewrite. So again, if you're using complex Visualforce flows, complex workflows within Visualforce, I strongly recommend that you look at and consider whether they can be turned into Salesforce visual flows, whether they can be turned into multiple Lightning components, or whether you can replace them with new standard Salesforce functionality. Lightning Design is the set of user experience guidelines, cascading style sheets, layout components, content guidelines, icons, et cetera, Very similar to Bootstrap or Foundation. In fact, looking at it, I would say it was based heavily on Bootstrap. Uses less and Sass to generate customized CSS files that can extend standard style elements. Even more now than ever before, it is very important that you use the standard Salesforce styling, use Lightning design, use Aura components, rather than going off and building your own user interface in Visualforce. If you do that, your code will be, if you use the standard capabilities, your code will be able to work and play with the Salesforce Chrome, interact with that Salesforce Chrome, consume events that are generated, generate events that can be consumed by other parts of the Salesforce page, and just generally work properly on both desktop and mobile. Okay, so talking through some of these slides are duplicates, and I'll skip through them because they're duplicated from last week or 2 weeks ago. Licenses that are supported by Salesforce Lightning include all of your Salesforce platform and all of your standard normal Salesforce licenses, internal users essentially. Unsupported licenses include chatter-free, company communities, all portal licenses, not necessarily communities licenses. Communities templates are actually based on Lightning and do support Lightning components. We've had some very good luck with that over the past few weeks. Force.com free, data.com, work.com, database.com, and so forth. So if you're not sure whether your license type supports Lightning Experience, I definitely recommend that you, well, first of all, give it a try. Second, look at the Winter 16 release notes. So looking at some of your standard Lightning Experience capabilities, accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, price books, products, calendars, events, tasks, basic support for cases, full support for custom objects, but not necessarily all of the customization that all of our customers have done on custom objects, chatter feeds, Salesforce files. There are a number of other sales and service objects like campaigns, orders, contacts, quotes, forecasting, and territory management that are not supported in Lightning Experience. If you use those heavily, just wait until they are supported. The home screen that I showed you, bottom line answer, it is not customizable right now. Neither is the left sidebar that you saw me working with. Salesforce has stated in their release notes and in their Trailhead modules that those will be coming, if not in the next release, then certainly very soon. Support for cases. Almost everything is supported. Cases started moving to Lightning kind of secretly and quietly a release or two before everything else in Salesforce. But for the actual Lightning Experience rollout, Salesforce chose to focus on sales. I don't know why they did that, but they did. Salesforce Communities. If you look at the winter release notes, Salesforce says that communities do not support Lightning Experience. That's only partly true. Communities, if you use the standard tabbed layout where you're basically giving a community user access to the standard out-of-the-box Salesforce user interface, that is still on Salesforce Classic. But if you use Salesforce templates like Koa or Napoli, those have migrated over to Lightning and they use Lightning components heavily. Customer and partner portals, not communities, but portals have not moved over to Lightning Experience. And frankly, I don't expect that they ever will. I think communities are the new portals, so you should plan to move to those. But again, I think that Salesforce is likely to support portals for the indefinite future, so I don't think there's necessarily any rush there. Salesforce reporting that I didn't show you, but we did talk about last time. Just a note that reports and dashboards created in Lightning Experience will not function in Salesforce Classic. So if you have a mixed organization or if you are an admin and you're experimenting with Lightning Experience, just remember that you can't create a report through Lightning Experience or a dashboard through Lightning Experience and have your other users able to access it. Just some general notes, formula fields with hyperlinks used heavily by a lot of our support and back-end operations users is not supported yet. Similarly, formula fields with images and list views is not supported in Lightning Experience yet. Neither is inline list view editing. These are elements that are used heavily by back office operations users of Salesforce, which includes most, if not all, Service Cloud users. So just, again, activate it in the sandbox, try it out, see how it works for you. And don't move on to Lightning until you're ready. Salesforce is not going to force you over, at least in the near future. So Kevin, with that, if you'll let me know that you're ready, I will move back over to you.
Sure. We did have a couple questions come in, Ernest. We answered a couple as we were going through, but we had a couple that we held for you. Do we need to write a test class in support of Flow? Was a question that came in.
No, you do not. And let me actually go ahead and just change myself back to the presenter here so you guys don't get dead air. But the answer is no, you do not have to write a test class in support of Flow. And I think that is a terrible, terrible thing. As a good developer, and remember that if you are writing flows, you may be an admin, but you are doing work that is complex, that must be maintained, and that should be tested. So even though you do not have to write a test class, as a good developer, you should always follow a very simple process, and other developers have different processes, but the one I like to follow is take a piece of paper, just a piece of scratch paper, and write down one sentence for each of these subjects. What are you going to do? What is your desired end result? What could go wrong, and how you are going to prevent that? When you are ready for deployment, what could go wrong with deployment, and how are you going to roll that back? And then how are you going to test? And then how could you change? How is the work that you did just now going to fail? Or how will your customers ask you to change it in the near future? Okay? So that's 5 or 6 different steps. It should only take you 30 seconds or so to go through each one, but just think through it and think through, what are you going to do? How am I going to test it? How is it going to change? How could it break? What will I do if it breaks? Okay? If you think through all of those things, you will find that your development experience is much better and much smoother, and that you'll have an easier time of maintaining this in the future. Of course, I would love it if we had the ability to write unit tests for visual flows, and I definitely like it when our customers do true, proper user acceptance testing with a good development flow. But we know that not everybody does that.
Thanks, Ernest. Another question that came in. When you use the mention functionality, is it possible to dynamically mention someone rather than hard-coding a user? The example provided was mention account owner as opposed to the account owner associated with the case as opposed to a specific user.
You know, that's a good question, and I thought you could, and I'm pretty sure that's what I did in my original process, but I couldn't see how to do it today. So the answer is a firm I'm not sure, unfortunately.
That's okay.
I'll try to research that while Kevin's talking a little later.
Very good. We also had a couple that came in that were answered in flight. If anybody missed those, one of them was what were some basic recommended trailheads. If you haven't already, definitely take the Lightning Experience Basics, and then Lightning Experience Rollouts are a couple. And while you take those, if you Google any of them, you'll find the full list of basic trailheads. And then if you click through to modules, there's some very specific trailheads that have been created on all kinds of subjects. So the answer to the question as to which ones we would recommend would be determined by the role that you're playing and what you're trying to accomplish. But certainly we encourage you guys to keep digging there. Another question that was asked, and Michelle has answered it, was can we get a recording of the webinar today? Absolutely. We'll do some cleanup on the edits. We'll take out all of my ums, and we'll post that recording late today on the website. We'll also email it out. The website also contains recordings of previous webinars, so feel free to go back and take a look. If anybody missed the one we did 2 weeks ago on the Sales Cloud, we assumed that we had dual participation in some of these, so there are some items that we skipped over today that are click over to the next couple slides, that'd be great, instead of swapping back.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And we'll keep an eye on questions as we go here. So just a couple, some shameless pitching here at the end of our webinar. We do have a couple specific offerings that if you do have an existing org and are considering some optimizations, or considering a Lightning deployment, we do have a couple specific offerings that may benefit you. One of them being our Lens health and audit service. Lens is a managed package diagnostic application that we can install and run in any existing org, obviously with permission. It provides us a full metadata backup and also gives us a really holistic view of the metadata, of the schemas, of the uses of the org, and from there we can glean a lot of information. So if somebody does have a project coming up and they would like a health check on the org and a snapshot backup of a full metadata backup of where they are starting before they undertake the project, we absolutely have that available. And then the other offering that we have all the time, in addition to all of our implementation and optimization services, we do have some structured support offerings. Those would be on the next slide, Ernest, if you want to jump over. We've got a very flexible engagement model when it comes to support. Pam Bryan, who's been with us and just does a great job. Most of you will know her. She's very active in the Atlanta market in the users group and very active on the partner community as well. Runs that support group, runs sales for that support group. Everything from staff augmentation, advisory services, ad hoc support, project support, ongoing concierge support, where you have the same dedicated resource every time you dial in, so that somebody gets familiar with your org. We do have a very flexible support model. So we encourage you to reach out, and we thank you very much for your participation. Let me take a quick look and see if we've had any other questions come in. It looks like that's it for the questions today, Ernest. Everybody, thank you very much for your participation. Do look for the next invite. We will have another webinar coming out likely in January, and we look forward to seeing everybody at that time. Thanks much.
And Kevin,
oh, go ahead, Ernest.
Yep, and Kevin, real quick, I will show you how to @mention somebody. So you can't @mention a particular role or reference user from here, unfortunately. But down here, you can use @ open bracket, close bracket, and then insert the owner ID like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the @ symbol like you would do a normal @mention, square brackets, and then insert the owner ID within those square brackets. I have not tested that, but I did look at it on a couple of blogs, and it looks like it's been used successfully by a couple of people.
Excellent, Ernest. Thank you. So for everybody, enjoy Lightning, be careful with it, use the trailheads, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thanks a bunch.